Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you're doing well. And I am about to embark on a kind of long-winded video here, but one of the biggest rappers in the game saw fit to drop a multi-part interview series on his YouTube channel. So I thought I would respond to some of the bigger and most important points. Eminem sat down with none other than media legend Sway for a pretty in-depth interview on his mental state, his artistic process, the drama surrounding him currently, and his latest full-length album, Kamikaze. And I think it's a pretty decent interview. It's a revealing interview. Even if it is a little puffy, it's kind of in a set studio. You know, it's not like I guess in a radio booth or anything like that. It seems like there's quite a few edits during the interview too. Sway is obviously there to talk to Eminem so that Eminem can kind of get his ideas out there onto his YouTube channel. Sway is clearly not there to, challenge Eminem too hard or make him feel awkward or anything. So again, if I didn't say it already, it's a little puffy. It's a little puffy. But still, I think Sway did a great job of playing off of Eminem and asked some good questions and guided Eminem through some essential talking points during this current time in his career. And really what ended up winning me over during this interview are just Eminem's answers. I think he gave a lot of good answers. I mean, he didn't exactly warm me up to his new album or anything like that, but I'm going to go over some of the major points in different sections of this video that he talked about through the interview. And let me start with the first one, MGK, Machine Gun Kelly. One of the biggest dramatic topics to come out of this new Eminem album, this new album cycle, is this beef that he has with Machine Gun Kelly, which, as he reveals in the interview, isn't really as big of a beef as maybe Machine Gun Kelly thinks it is. I mean, there have been some more overt shots now thanks to this new Machine Gun Kelly diss track, but it seems like MGK just has a complete misunderstanding of the situation if we are to take Eminem at his word, and as of right now, I don't really see any reason not to. It became pretty clear from what Eminem was saying was that MGK making a big deal over, oh, what I said about your daughter got you in your feelings and blah, 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 blah. And clearly in the interview, Eminem was annoyed by that, but it seemed like Eminem was, as he stated in the interview, reacting to something that was much more petty, and that was just, again, these subtle shots against Eminem that MGK had been throwing out there, because for whatever reason, MGK has it in his head that Eminem is standing in between him and fame and success and album sales and relevancy, which, hey, you know what? Even if it's true and it's for the dumbest, pettiest, most nonsensical reason on the planet that, hey, you're not allowed on Shade 45 and so on and so forth. Like, how could you really sort of see that as your only path to success? Like, if you're a great artist and you're already signed to a label and you're making music that actually resonates with people, people are going to open the door for you. You have this platform and the ability to make the type of music that people want to hear. But the thing is that you're not. I would much rather listen to a new Eminem project, as much as I have disliked his past couple, than a new MGK project, because I know that there's probably going to be at least something of substance on an Eminem album. He'll pull through with at least a couple of good songs. He'll have an interesting flow here and there, even if there are a lot of ideas that I don't really care for. Again, hands down, I would rather listen to a new Eminem album than an MGK album. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on that. Next, I would like to talk about what Eminem brought up in regards to Joe Budden and Slaughterhouse in this video. And I didn't really disagree with a lot of what Eminem said in regards to Joe Budden in this interview. I know I didn't discuss Budden's response to Eminem. And I'm glad that Joe said something, but I did think that maybe he was a little delusional in how he put his response, in claiming that I've been better than you for the past decade. I've been better than you for the past 10 years. Which, I mean, Joe has some good songs that he's released in the past 10 years. I will give him that. I will give him that. But in my opinion, Joe has not had a project in the past decade that is better than Marshall Mathers LP2, number one. And number two, I feel like that's such a weak and cringy thing to put out there and brag about, that essentially Eminem, in your opinion, needs to be at his lowest point artistically in order for you to say, I'm better than you. I've been better than you. I've been better than you for this very recent and limited amount of time, but I've been better than you. You know, what's that Jay-Z line? It's like bragging about being the tallest midget or something. You know, look, I think Eminem has had his low points over the past decade, true, but even with the bad moments, I think over the past decade, Eminem has been more interesting than Joe Budden's career has been. To simply say Eminem has just rhymed a bunch of words and that's it, I mean, I think he's tried to make songs of substance. I think Eminem has tried. I just think that some of the flows, despite the fact that they're technical, they're not as interesting or as compelling as Eminem might think they are. Some of the production is really trash. And some of the tunes aren't really all that great either. It seemed like for Eminem in the interview, it was more of an issue of principle. Like, we've worked together, I helped support your music career, I helped try to get Slaughterhouse off the ground and get the potential out of you guys and make a hit record with you guys. I was working with you guys on the second album, or rather supporting that process, and you guys just didn't really come together and make that album. Maybe there are more details to that situation that could be brought to light if Joe speaks on it in another podcast or something. But as of right now, Eminem's description of the whole situation seemed pretty honest, I guess, in the way that he delivered it in the interview. Again, it's a pretty puffy interview, so anything that is awkward or is going to make Eminem look bad is most likely not going to come out in an interview series like this. Keep that in mind. But still, at least the way it was presented, it seemed like it was believable. It just felt like M thought that because they had worked together, there was this established respect there that, hey, we're not going to diss each other, we're not going to hate on each other like that because we have collaborated or our careers in a way have been intertwined at some point. So we're never going to use our platforms to attack one another or take one another down. Though, you know, I think Eminem could have maybe given Joe a touch of leeway in the fact that Joe now runs a sort of a little media empire where it is his job to comment on hip hop, and he was put into a situation where he awkwardly had to comment on you and what you're doing because that's his job now. He's not just a full-time rapper anymore where he can just kind of avoid talking about you or dissing you in a song. He is a commentator, and you are going to be the subject matter of what he does eventually, because you are one of the prime stars in the genre, and he can't just act like you don't exist, you know, or not be honest or not be truthful in his critiques or his opinions, because people are going to smell that from a mile away, which would potentially put his career as a commentator in danger. And it seems like that's what he wants to do. That's the path forward that he wants to make. And I don't think the fact that he had to comment on you and do so in an honest fashion and not in the most positive fashion in the world was really a slight against you personally. I remember him talking about Eminem and the revival rollout on Everyday Struggle, and it seemed like he was doing his best to preface everything he was saying by putting it out there that, hey, we've worked together. I'm not trying to attack the guy. I'm not trying to hate on the guy, but I need to give my honest opinion here, and yada, 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 yada. I think Eminem could have, given Joe's career switch here, been maybe a little bit more understanding. Though, again, how Joe responded to M was kind of ridiculous too. So I guess those are my thoughts on that. Next in this series, I would like to talk about Tyler, the Creator, because he came up during the interview. Sway brought him up and said that he was a huge fan of his work and was a bit confused over the diss that Eminem threw out against him on Kamikaze, and was hoping to maybe kind of mend a bridge here between the both of them, because he does seem like a guy who genuinely loves the music of both artists and would rather see these two getting along and potentially working together rather than being at odds with one another. And yeah, with Eminem, it seemed similar to the Joe Budden situation in that he's had interactions with Tyler. He is aware of the fact that his best material has influenced some of Tyler's work at some point in his career, and that he felt like the shot that Tyler threw out against him on Twitter was a little much. That Earl Sweatshirt sort of talking about how Eminem fans are drinking too much Mountain Dew or whatever was a little out of pocket, because I don't know, it just seems like there's a sea change here in hip hop where it's just okay to disrespect the legends, even if they've influenced you. And I think that partially comes with the punk attitude of this new generation, but simultaneously I think it holds doubly true for Eminem because of how isolated and separated he is stylistically from a lot of the industry right now. He's very much a lone wolf at the moment, even though he does try to here and there do things through his shady label. And I feel like that lone wolf status has put himself in a position where he is going to be attacked more frequently than a lot of other older artists are who might have more connections and more influence. Like Tyler, for example, when you go back into his internet history, you see him dissing Kanye West, Jay Dilla, so on and so forth. But these days, Tyler will most likely never have a negative thing to say about Kanye. And that's because Kanye is still super relevant, still holds a lot of influence, still works with a lot of different artists. And again, I think even though Kanye has had his low points over the past decade too, you don't see a guy like Tyler coming out there and sort of jumping on top of them in the way that you saw him kind of jumping on top of Eminem. And Eminem was obviously hurt by that, and I think he went about responding to that in a way that ended up making him look bad. It seemed like he was just on the border of admitting that during the interview, but he didn't quite apologize or make it super obvious that he was remorseful over the whole thing. Though, I mean, his actions kind of are indicative of that, in that he called Tyler a faggot on the record. He was listening back to it in the studio, and him and someone else made the decision to reverse the word. And then he spoke in the interview as if he was surprised that even though the word was reversed, people were still offended, or even though the word was reversed, people figured out what he said or something. Like, yeah, it's plain as day what you said. And look, here's the thing. People get up my ass about, oh, well, you're just getting so mad about his use of that word. Look, it's not that he just used the word in general. Alex Cameron's latest record, he uses that word a couple times on his new record, and I love that record. But the thing is, he makes use of that word in a funny and an interesting and a clever way that actually kind of critiques in a very self-aware fashion the use of that word in general. But I digress. Eminem just sort of threw it out there to try to hurt him and get back at him. And here's the thing. When Tyler was talking about how much he disliked that Beyonce track, he's somebody who's been known to run off at the mouth. He probably didn't really think that much of what he was saying or what the impact might be. It probably didn't mean all that much to him to just say, hey, I think the song sucks. Meanwhile, it seemed like it meant a whole lot to Eminem to hear that critique, despite the fact that, as they acknowledge in the interview, Eminem used to be a total fucking dick when he was younger, a dick to everybody. And hey, you know what? Maybe this is a little bit of cosmic karma, whatever, coming back and kind of hitting Eminem in his older age. Who knows? But here's the thing. Clearly, Eminem was lashing out of anger and bitterness with that lyric, which is what made the lyric so ugly and annoying. And again, on top of it, when you're reversing the word on the record before you're putting it out, you're clearly already showing buyer's remorse, you know, on the bar that you put out there. And if you're so, I guess, bothered by what you're hearing that you have to alter it, then maybe you just should have redone it, honestly. Because if you thought it was that great of a line, and if you thought it was that great of an idea, you wouldn't have reversed the shit. You would have just put it out there because that's what I want to say. I was right in saying what I said, and I'm just firing back and da-da-da-da-da. But you reversed it because it was clearly something in the back of your head itching at you, because in the past, you have been called homophobic because of the language on your records. And time again, you've said, oh, I'll try to do better. Or, you know, I've performed or held hands on stage with Elton John and tried to show everybody around me that, you know, look, I don't have anything against the LGBTQ community, so on and so forth. But it seems like you can't help yourself from slipping back into this direction. And I get that in your opinion, the word doesn't mean anything, or your use of the word shouldn't be perceived as such a big deal. But again, clearly even you yourself were showing a bit of hesitance there with the reversal of the word. And I feel like the way that you employed it against the person that you did, you wanted that word to have a certain kind of impact. And I think Eminem could have done better to acknowledge that in the interview, that very obvious fact. But Sway said something that I said in my very review of Kamikaze, in that I feel like this is an artist you should be getting along with. This is an artist who you should be working with. This is an artist who you should be making music with. You could be learning from, he could be learning from you. This could be like a beautiful two-way street where both of you gain off of one another. And look, as low as some of the points artistically Eminem has put out over the past decade or so, I would still love to hear him put out music that's great. I would still love to hear him working with new young artists that have actually learned from him, built off of him, who he could make great tracks with, you know, in much the same way that Kanye learns from and collaborates with almost everybody who's young and relevant. I think Eminem could very much be doing the same thing with his stuff. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the Tyler section. Finally, I would like to talk about in this video Eminem's feelings on the concept of this new project that he dropped, or at least the concept of a good chunk of it, as in this interview he almost categorized this album as an opportunity for him to kind of fire back at everybody who's been firing at him over his recent album releases, and this idea, this perception on his part that everyone hates him, everyone hates Eminem. And look, I mean, I'm not blind, deaf, and dumb. It's been pretty apparent over the past 5, 6, 7 years, 8 years, that there has been a huge opinion change and a stylistic sea change in the world of hip-hop in terms of what sells, what sounds good, and who is and isn't making great music. I feel like Eminem is doing stuff now that maybe 15 years ago would have like totally killed it, or maybe won quite a few people over. But these days it's not getting a whole lot of play, though still, even to say that I think is a bit of an overstatement, because Kamikaze still did do some pretty nice numbers first week. I mean, didn't go platinum in a week or anything, but still almost did like 500,000. Eminem's not doing too bad. Eminem, for a lot of people at his lowest point, is where a lot of younger artists now will be at their highest point. So still, shout out to and respect to Eminem for still doing some pretty big and respectable numbers on his latest releases, and also not doing anything fudgy or silly with the numbers in the same way a guy like Jay-Z does, because he's so self-conscious about not selling as much as he needs to sell to get platinum and blah, 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 blah with his new releases, that he can't just put an album out there and just literally see how it does and see what the numbers are and see what the reception is and just leave it at that. So Eminem talking about how everybody hates him at this point in his career. And I see that and I understand that. I think there is an unreasonable amount of hate against Eminem in this point of his career. Not to say that he hasn't done things to bring that hate on himself. And again, as I said earlier, not to say that maybe this could be as a result of some kind of cosmic karma here coming around to bite him. And maybe if he fights through it, he'll get to a point where he finds more peace and more cohesion and respect within the hip hop community current day. But it can be tough, I'm sure, in his position to feel like I can't do anything right, because I think there have been some great things that Eminem has done over the past 5 to 6 years. I think, again, Marshall Mathers LP2 had some great moments on it, which I don't think got acknowledged. There is a large contingent of supposed hip hop fans out there who just, I guess, can't be pleased by anything he does. And for whatever reason, it just seems to drive him crazy. And maybe it shouldn't. Maybe it shouldn't. But I'm sure it can be maddening to be someone who has had such an amazingly large audience over the course of his career, has sold more than any other artist has in the genre, continues to demand a lot of attention with his music. But as he said in the interview, it seems like whenever I zig, it's like I should have zagged, or whenever I zag, I should have zigged. And again, MMLP2, I think his BET, Trump, Cypher, Freestyle, whatever that I talked about in a previous video, I thought that was pretty good too. You know, I thought that was good. Even though there were some people kind of picking it apart lyrically and so on and so forth, I think the message and the performance and the intention of what that was there. And I thought for the most part it was very good. I thought it was something that was needed as far as a message from a rapper of his stature. And as he said in the interview, someone who has an audience of people who potentially could have voted for Trump. Maybe in retrospect, he says he wishes he didn't draw that line in the sand or whatever. But even that, I don't think he should regret personally. But I think Eminem has done some important and some essential stuff over the past 10 years and has made some good music. But not everybody has been willing to acknowledge that. And I'm not saying that I'm never hard on Eminem. Sometimes I am. But keep in mind, I'm not trying to hate on the guy. I don't wish he would stop making music. I just wish he would make better music, I guess. You know, I really don't want to see the guy disappear. I really don't want to see the guy quit. I still think the guy has an incredible amount of talent and technical ability. I just think maybe he's in a very isolated place right now, and he really needs to be branching out, not only beyond himself, but beyond what seems like the usual people who he's always hearing from. And I think he maybe was changing it up a little bit on Kamikaze with working with some of the trendier producers that he did on that new album. But I feel like he needs to stretch beyond even that, because there are a lot of young and great artists out there who, despite the fact that he's not at the highest point of his career artistically right now, still do look up to a lot of his older stuff. And as a result of that, I think there are a lot of people who he could potentially be working with and putting on who have very much a sound and a style that connects with millennial audiences. Yes, he has reached out to the likes of Big Sean, but I think he also could be, you know, putting a bridge out there with a J. Cole or a Logic or a Lou the Human, or, as I said earlier, Tyler the Creator. I think going forward, Eminem has a lot of potential. Whether or not he capitalizes on it, that will remain to be seen. But I guess this interview gives me a touch of hope, not in that he promised to do so with his future releases or anything, but he seems so much more reasonable and self-aware and clear in his state of mind in this interview than he does on this album, which, again, as I said in my review, I'll say again here, seems mostly like Eminem. While he does like coming from that place of anger, and it can certainly benefit the quality of his music if applied correctly, like in the Chloroseptic remix, which was pretty dope, as I said when I talked about it, I think that Eminem can also let that anger blind him and put him in a place where he's just lashing out in a very bitter fashion, which for a guy of his stature, for a guy who I guess has had the track record he has had, it's not a very good look. It's not a very good look. It's not very appealing. It's not very interesting to listen to, and it just sounds very petty and unlikable, and in a way sad, because you're in a position where you should be not above firing back at anybody, but you should be in a position where even if you do fire back, it needs to feel like this shit is really just rolling off your back and doesn't really matter, because you're just like, I don't give a fuck. And instead, I didn't really get that vibe, and I don't think a lot of other people did either. It just felt like, I'm hurt, I'm upset, and I'm just going to thrash around and hope that my responses hurt everyone else as much as I've been hurt. Which again, not the best look. I do appreciate, as I close this video, the shout out, the little shout out, and a bit of acknowledgement that Sway gave to the YouTube reviewing community and people with different reviewing shows and stuff on YouTube. It's great that he acknowledges that, and he brings up that this is kind of the new wave. There are very few people in traditional media who are willing to admit that people who are doing what I do have influence and have sway and are doing something important. Again, really nice to kind of hear that. So shout out to Sway. You know, I know I've said in this video that the interview was puffy and so on and so forth, but make no mistake, Sway is a incredibly talented and smart and an important guy who, if he didn't exist and he wasn't doing what he's been doing for decades, the music and hip hop media and commentary landscape would look very different than what it is. So I think those are all of my collective thoughts on this Eminem interview series. Thank you very much for watching. Over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up, or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Eminem, Sway, interview, forever.